Good day. We're going to start off with a quick snapshot session on Azure Management API. Now, Azure Management API is something which just got recently launched on 12th of May. It's currently in the preview. Before I kind of get into the deep dive on Azure Management API, I'm just going to be talking a little bit on the background of the API acquisition Microsoft made in October 2013. So in October 2013, Microsoft acquired a company called API Fanny. Now, API Fanny is a rich API platform, and it's post-acquisition. And what we've really seen is in the month of May, Microsoft has essentially got the Azure Management API, which is essentially the API management service for Azure, which has been much awaited, and this is currently already there in the preview. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit more on the API side of the story. There are plenty of platforms which are there in the market, which are currently, on the API side, and you probably heard of Apigee. There are a couple of other API platforms which are reasonably good. Now, I'm really going to do a rundown comparison later in my blog post, but right now I'm just going to be concentrating on the Azure Management API. So, if you actually get onto the Azure Management portal, you probably see the API management piece, which is currently in preview, and it shows in preview. Now, I have X matrix entry which is created in the API management. Quickly getting into the dashboard of it. Before I get into the dashboard, you actually see you got the management console, the development portal, and there's some links in the documentation. But honestly, there is really in the documentation, which is Microsoft's release. If you actually kind of Google on this, you're probably not going to get much. Getting into the dashboard side of the story, it's going to give you a very similar usage overview what we see of the rest of the service of Azure. Uh, Bear with me for my network is a little slow. It's really slow. Anyway, now there are certain other aspects in terms of scale and configure. Not much of documentation is really available on it, but so I'm not really going to waste too much of time. I mean, these are self-explanatory from a cloud standpoint of view. Getting more into the management side of the story. So if you actually click on manage, you actually come down to a rich Azure API management portal. Now, essentially, the dashboard, which is essentially going to be talking about all the APIs, it's going to give you one consolidated view about how your APIs have been working today, yesterday, last 7 days, and so on, and last 90. Products essentially are nothing but a container of APIs, and similarly you have applications. Now I'm going to run down on the API. So I have two APIs now. You can actually go and add an API. Now, obviously, this is the title of the API. This is the web service URL and the suffix. So let's say I'm going to say weathergods.org slash get weather. And I'm sorry for the typo. So and I'm just going to call this weather service. So what's really happening out here? I have a weather service which essentially has a web service URL, weathergods.org, and get weather. It's probably going to take the parameters, and then eventually you actually have the URL suffix in terms of what gets added to what's get added to the Azure API-net. So that's the name dot Azure-API.net is something which that's how the APIs are going to get exposed, and you have your suffix. I'm not going to go into this. So I already have an existing API called Weather API, and I just click onto it, and probably I'm going to see a quick response, a rich graph which actually tells me in terms of how things are really performing. Again, the same old principle in terms of today, yesterday, and 7 days. I'm not going to spend too much time into that. Uh, what's What's interesting, however, is getting into the settings part of it, where I'm going to see this is where this real meat of the existing. So API dot openweathermap.org slash data slash 2.5.forecast is something which the web service URL, the actual web service URL, and I have the credential which can actually be none and basic. Now you could argue a bit more on the authentication part of it, and in terms of tokens and all, that's something we would see a work in progress, and that would eventually come in due course of time. Now, coming on to operations, now every service you're going to have certain operations associated with it. You can go and add your operations. So probably you can have the words in terms of get, post, put. So the least you're going to do is like you're going to have a get operation. So in this case, what we have out here is a get resource, and that can be a get cache resource. So it's just what I've kind of put, the parameters if I want to kind of add a query parameter and so on and so on. It's very simple to get up and running on this you know now issues is something which we can actually get on to the issues which it actually get. So I'll get onto the portal side of it, and basically kind of developer portal side, the API portal side of it, and actually get into. So we have two APIs which are listed under X matrix. Now this is what we are currently logged on to, so the administration portal for the API management. I would actually get into the developer portal side of it in terms of what the developer would actually be seeing. So this is what uh, the developer portal is really going to be looking like. Now it still has to be customized. It's the content piece which actually comes in out here, and you also actually get a list of APIs. So I have eco and weather API, and let me just get into the weather API and open the console of it just to show this kind of works. This requires a uh, API key which is going to get shared by most of each and individual developer. So that kind of enables tracking in terms of which application or which developer is actually really playing with the API key. And here I add a parameter in terms of I would want to have a location, and I would probably say this is London, and I would just go and fire it out, HTTP get. So I would probably see the results in a couple of seconds. It should be here in a minute. Yeah, so here I have, it's taking about 6,012 milliseconds, and status is okay, and here this is where the data which is actually coming in. Now, having said that, so I pretty much have my API done and it's working and so on and so on. Now, let's say hypothetically speaking, I would want to make certain changes into my API response set, or basically have some kind of a data management around the data which is actually flowing in. So we got the concept of policies which are available, which actually kind of get which is already available in API Fanny. And I'm just going to take a look at the weather API, and here I can actually put certain policies around it. So I want to just go configure the policy. So I would want to kind of, so I put a the outbound policy definition kind of states what what's coming out of the the from the web service to the caller, so you can actually see. And what would I really want to play? So I would want to kind of replace the string with clear to happy, hypothetically speaking. So I'm just trying to put some. I would actually just go recalculate policy in effect, and actually, sorry, this should actually work. Yeah, there it goes. So, and it says, okay, I would want to kind of save on this and recalculate. So here we actually have, so the coder calls is something which is already there. So calls is 100, renewed period is, and limits is 5, and so on and so on. So what I've just effectively done, I would want to kind of change the data which is actually coming out of the web service. I want to change certain certain keyword, certain data which is coming. So I would want to kind of change the clear to happy. And now while we're on the policy statement, there are plenty of stuff you can actually do within the policy statement. I would want to have all my output kind of my JSON output to come in XML, or vice versa. I would prefer to have all the data which is coming, if your web service is actually giving the data, you can actually in XML you want a JSON format. You want to have some kind of authentication in case of inbound, so probably you want to do something of this sort. And here, but I cannot put a username, password. Um, Allow cross-domain calls. I may also have the CORS, and sometimes I want to kind of get from cache. And if I have a JSON procedure, which I would want to kind of call in case of an outbound, so I can do a lot of stuff effectively in terms of playing around with, before and after calling the web services. I would want to do certain set of processing. Yeah, I would expect a little bit more richer interface around the policy, and something which, if you get a chance to see Apogee, you probably see where this can, the inbound and outbound can actually be broken down into a workflow, and that's where I would decide to basically call multiple other application before kind of, or in on an outbound I would want to pass the data somewhere else. So I can do that. So the workflow piece is something which is already there in API Fanny, and would expect, ideally expect, a lot of this thing to come. So while we're on it, I'm just going to cancel this, discard the changes, and I'm going to look at back. Okay, is my clear and happy really working? So probably go back to my portal, and this time I'm probably going to take my location as Mumbai, because where the skies are predominantly blue. So let's say I'm actually go get the data from Mumbai. So here we get the data, and this is it. So it says sky is happy. So the description is something, if wherever it's actually sky is clear, it actually got to go into the description change. So what effectively, we got a powerful tool in terms of playing around with not just kind of putting the APIs on to the management side of it and throwing the metrics into it, but I'd rather probably want to kind of put some business logic before and after calling the API. So that's something which I would see more on Microsoft to kind of do that stuff. So while I'm there, so you actually, the policy is a rich part of the policy is a rich part of APIs. So it's essentially what you need to remember is the inbound and outbound. That's where you can really play with things. Getting further into the products, it's just nothing but a container of APIs. Um, Analytics. This is an interesting piece. So probably, I would want to kind of get the data in terms of the calls which had been made, the response time, the bandwidth, and the errors in case. So basically, the overall health of it, something usage and health, something of the web service which I would kind of want to take a look at. And yeah, I guess this looks okay. And then I can I can divide the calls based on uh, you know developer, products, APIs, and operations. And I'm actually getting the response times, which is actually mentioning out here the based on the operations which are being, and if there were any block calls and so on. So the next part is the developers, where I mean essentially it's not much. I'm actually just gonna give a list of who are my developers. I invite a certain developers to participate or to work on my APIs. I can define groups. Very similar concept. I can have um, notifications is something which um, it's subscription notification if a developer would want to kind of subscribe to your APIs, and so that's actually going to come down to you and you probably prove it and so on. Uh, Applications, submitted applications, not much is really happening out there at the moment. Security, you actually when the subscription really wants to kind of sign up, you can definitely look at multiple options as external identities. So now getting into the developer portal of it. So developer portal is currently, you can actually go begin, you can go customize your page. So for the sake of the discussion, I'm probably not going to customize, I'm just going to go with what is available. You're going to see home, APIs, products, applications, and issues, very similar, but this is just the actual development side of what the developer really gets to see. And you can actually go test it. You can see the C# example in terms of how you really want to get to use this. So it's fairly useful. And products, probably you can look at the products which are available, and it probably puts on data around in terms of how the users are really going to do. So this is the content management piece of it. So in a nutshell, coming back to the the Azure interface. We've seen the API management portal, API management piece provided by Windows Azure or Microsoft Azure is fairly good. It's fairly off to a good start. I probably see a lot more features kind of coming in the next couple of months, and I would like to see a lot more documentation coming around. At this point of time, there's very limited documentation. So thank you, and I hope that was informative.